Hey, everybody. Carrie Schaefer, also known as Kerry Anne King, here with you for another edition of Tell Me Your Secrets. And tonight, things are really a little weird because it's Thursday evening for me here in Washington State, and our lovely guest is with us from the future. So, hey, Susan Spann, who is actually, it's Friday morning for you. Is that right?
It is. It is 10:30 Friday morning in Tokyo.
10:30 Friday morning in Tokyo. So Susan, the lovely Susan, is here with us from Japan. And we're just excited because we had talked to each other. Have this time to have a conversation. And you may or may not be listening in, and we'll maybe pretend you're not here. But, on the other hand, we might give away a couple of books tonight. So, we'll figure it out as we go. So without any further ado, Susan, lovely Susan, let's talk about you a little bit. So the illustrious Susan Spann, when I first met her, was writing mystery novels, which she still is writing, by the way. And she is the author of the Hiro Hattori. Did I pronounce him right?
You did.
Cool. And he's not a ninja. He is
a ninja, but he's pretending to be a samurai.
Right, but it's not really ninja. You explained to me that ninja is not the right word. A shinobi, yes.
Yes, which is actually the word ninja comes from the Chinese pronunciation of the kanji, or the characters that are read shinobi, or shadowed person in Japan.
Right. So, okay. And I always forget that. So it was important for me to, actually ask you about that. So those of you, I see people are starting to pop in, say hi, pop in and say hi to Susan. You can put your comments in the comments. And Susan is kindly offering to give away a couple of books tonight to people who comment and participate. Yes. So make sure that you do that, and we'll choose people as we go. Hi, Kay is here. So as I was explaining, Susan, when I first met her, was writing mystery novels, which she still is. And now she's here with us tonight, though, to talk about a completely different book. And the book is called Climb, tell me, that subtitle.
Yeah.
Was Leaving Safe.
It is Climb and
I know
Finding
the
Strength
climb
on
part.
100 summits in Japan.
Great. Say that again. It kind of broke up.
It's a mouthful. It's Climb, Leaving Safe and Finding Strength on 100 summits in Japan.
Right, exactly. So Astrid, somebody named Astrid, who apparently knows you, is poking her head in. She says, hi, Susan. So we need to talk about what took you. There's so many questions. There are so many questions. What took you from writing mystery novels to writing what's a memoir, really, more or less, I believe, an inspirational one about somebody climbing mountains in Japan? Did the book come first, or did the idea to climb the mountains come first? And we'll talk about the obstacles that got in the way in a little bit, because I know you had the idea before the ugly C word came along. So where did it start? Was it the chicken or the egg? Was it the book or the mountains? Or
it was actually the mountains that came first. Basically, I'd been afraid my entire life. I lived my life in fear, is a really good way to put it. From the time I was a little kid. And one thing, it's actually a story that comes up in the book, but when I was a kid, I wouldn't even go in one of those bouncy houses that little kids like to bounce in the house. I wouldn't even go into those because I was afraid, because there was a warning label on them that said, enter at your own risk. And I didn't know what the risk was. And so I was too afraid to go in the bounce house.
Yeah. So the enter at your own risk, and you didn't know what the risk was. And of course, nobody would tell you.
Well, I didn't ask. Because I assumed that since it said at your own risk, but didn't say what the risk was, that everybody else knew what the danger was, except for me. And so, because I didn't know what the risk was, this was at the age of 7, by the way. I didn't know what the risk was, so I couldn't evaluate whether or not I was willing to take it. And so I wasn't willing to take it, and so I walked away.
And it wasn't the sort of thing where you were prepared to ask the question because you assumed that everybody else knew, and then therefore that would make you
look dumb.
Look dumb, right? Which you clearly were not if you were 7 and reading
evaluating the risks of the bounce house. So this was indicative of how I lived my life. I mean, I was so risk averse that I would run in the opposite direction. I went into practice of law because it was safe. I really wanted to be a novelist, but I became a lawyer instead of really trusting myself. I loved languages. I loved Chinese and Japanese history, which I studied in college. I really wanted to go get a PhD in that discipline, but I didn't know what I would do with it to earn a living. And so I was too afraid. And so I went into law because my father was a lawyer, my great grandfather was a lawyer, his father was a lawyer, and it was just it was what I knew. It was safe. And after my father died, which happened about 12 years ago, I started looking at the fact that he too had lived his entire life just shackled up by fear. And I thought, is this my future? Is this what I'm going to be? And I had managed to get my novels published, and I had taken that risk, and it had worked out after a lot of very hard work. But I was still hanging on to the practice of law. I didn't trust myself to go and be a novelist or try to make a living writing, which was really what I wanted to do. And I was just too afraid. And so I decided I was going to do one of the scariest things I could think of in order to break free from the cycle of fear that held my life. And that was, I was going to take a year sabbatical. I was going to shutter my law firm. At that point, I was a sole practitioner, so it really wasn't like I had something that could protect me. And I was going to come to Japan and climb 100 mountains, attempt to climb the Hakumeizan, 100 famous mountains of Japan in a single year, which no woman had ever done. No Western woman.
No Western woman. Not to mention okay, a middle-aged-ish, a young middle-aged woman.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the time I decided to do this thing, I was 45. I'm 49, turned 49 this year, and I earned every one of them. And all these women who are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to turn 50. I'm like, dude, I have the scars. I have the T-shirt. I want the credit.
Right. Give me the credit. Right.
But so I made this decision that I was going to go do this thing, and I contacted but the problem is Japan is notoriously difficult to get a visa. And I was concerned that although I came here every year to research and write my novels, I was concerned that just a novel wouldn't be enough to support a visa for a year, because you're not going to climb 100 mountains in a year coming in on a 3-month visa. It's just not going to happen. So I called my agent and I said, think anybody would be interested in this? And she was like, this is a great story. Yes. Middle-aged woman drops life to go climb mountains and find herself. It's like Eat, Pray, Love in Japan. I'm like, great. And so we contacted the publisher, and they signed it. We signed a contract, and I had to come over to Japan in December. I made the decision to do it in July of 2017. And in end of October, early November 2017, we signed the contract. And I signed the contract the day after I went in for my annual mammogram, because I was going to need to get that out of the way. It wasn't due for another 3 months, but I thought I'll get it out of the way because I got to go to Japan in December. All this, anyway.
Being efficient, Susan, you were just doing the requisite medical checkup things to, be organized and get things.
Yeah, yes. Sorry, I signed the contract the day before.
Right.
The day before I went in for the mammogram, because when I went in for the mammogram, things did not, in fact, go routinely or as planned, and they found something that they then biopsied. And a week later, I had a diagnosis of breast cancer. And I remember, will never forget, you also are a breast cancer survivor. And I will never forget that I made it out of the doctor's office without losing my mind. I mean, I made it that far, and made it as far as my car. And I called you and I just said, I need you to tell me that I can survive this, because my whole life, since I had been 12 years old, I had been convinced, my grandmother died of breast cancer when I was 12. I had been convinced that I also was going to die of breast cancer. And when I made the decision to throw my life in the winds and face my fears, I didn't really know that I was going to be facing all of them.
You're not going to face that fear too. That was like, yeah.
Be careful what you ask for, because you will in fact get it in spades, right? I'd like to face my fears in a really safe way, and no, there's no such thing. And so I called you, and I'll never forget saying, I need you to tell me that I can survive this.
Which I of course did.
You did, and I needed to hear it from you. And the reason I needed to hear it from you was that you were the only person that I knew. I'd known several people who'd had breast cancer, but you were the only one that I knew well who had survived it. And I needed you to tell me that I could make it through. And so I'll be forever grateful for that. Love you.
Well, and I love you too. And it was I have to say, so inspirational watching how you faced up to the whole situation once you got your mind around it. It's like, okay, how long did it take before you had bullied your doctors into getting you into surgery? Because as I remember, you were really pushing it in that I need to be in Japan by such and such a date, and I need my surgery scheduled like now.
Yeah, I have a book contract.
And I have a book contract. Yeah.
I met they diagnosed me I had the biopsy on a Thursday. The biopsy went through on that Thursday, and I was supposed to get the results on Monday. And the radiologist was so convinced that it was cancer that he went ahead and set up the appointment with the surgeon for Monday morning. And when I met her, I got the biopsy results while I was literally sitting in her office waiting for her to walk in the door. They called. I was already there with the nurse navigator. As it happened, she already knew it was cancer. They just hadn't reached me yet. And so the doctor walked in. Yeah, Astrid is an interesting choice of words, and actually not even true. My doctors were great. They didn't need bullying.
Okay, I just assumed because it took forever to get anything to happen on, on my
literally,
end. So.
She walked in the door, and she was wonderful. Her name is Dr. Joelle Jacobson. She practiced in Sacramento. She's amazing. She's a wonderful surgeon, and she actually she walked in the door, and I stood up and I extended my hand. And I said, "Hi, I'm Susan. I have breast cancer, and I want to have a mammogram. I'm having a double mastectomy tomorrow. How's that for you?" And she looked at me and she went, "Can I examine you first?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, but tomorrow." And she did examine me, and she looked at her. And actually, before she examined me, the nurse navigator was still there, and she said, "Marie, would you please go out and see when she said, "You seem pretty certain." She said, "So, go see when the OR is available." That was on a Monday, and I had my double mastectomy on Thursday.
That was very quick.
It was very quick. But I knew what I wanted, and I knew that I did not want reconstruction. That's a very personal choice that every woman needs to make.
Right.
And
yeah. Oh, here's my funny. You know why I had reconstruction? This was I had my cancer was after I signed the contract for my first book, and it was coming out. This was before my first book was released. And my friend Julie Butcher, I love this woman to death. She said, "Oh, honey, you have to have boobs for your book signing." So I was like, "Oh."
Did you sign the book with your boobs? Well, I gotta know.
No, it was funny though. It was one of those moments that made me laugh, and I was like, yeah, okay, maybe I do. But yeah, different story, but different reasons. So so you chose not, and as I recall, part of that was just you wanted everything as expedient and smooth and quick and clean.
Yes. And you heal faster if you don't have reconstruction. Right. And I literally said to the doctor the same day of the appointment, I mean, I look back and what was I thinking? I said to her, if I have surgery on Friday, and this would have been November 10th, which is sort of my new birthday, November 10th, I said, I have airline tickets to Tokyo on December 18th. Can I go? I mean, I want to go. I was supposed to be signing my visa, and that wasn't happening because I was going to have to come back and delay my start of my climbs by 4 months so that I could go through intensive chemotherapy. But I said, I've got the plane tickets, and they were first class. And I'm like, I don't want to miss the trip. I want to go. And my son was coming to Tokyo for job interviews. So he and I were going to fly over together. I was going to sign my visa. He was going to do his job interviews. And I had an Airbnb rented. And I want to go, And the doctor looked at me and she said, "If you're healed, I'll tell you if you can go." And I said, no, that doesn't work for me. And she said, "Well, guess what? Some of this is going to have to be determined by how fast you heal." She said, "So if you want to go," and this is actually a funny story, it didn't make it into the book. She said, "If you want to go, you need to be up and walking after your surgery. You need to be moving so that you can heal." So the night after my surgery, I got to my room at 10 o'clock at night. And I said to the nurses, "I want to walk on the floor every time you come in to check me because the doctor says I have to be up and moving. So the nurses would come in to take my vitals, which they do every couple of hours. And I would get out of the bed and walk the entire loop of the floor. The floor was arranged in like a circle, like a donut with the nurses station in the middle. And I would walk the entire way around it. It would take me about 10 minutes to walk the entire way. And by 3 a.m., I noticed it was a new nurse. And by 6 a.m., I noticed that all the nurses at the station were laughing as I went by, because this was like my 4th or 5th lap. Because every time I'd wake up to go to the bathroom, anything, I'd do an entire loop of the floor, and a nurse had to come with me. They were handing me off because I was wearing them out. Like 12 hours post surgery, post double mastectomy. So the doctor comes in at 9 o'clock in the morning. She looks at the chart, and her face just drops. And I'm thinking, oh no, what's going on? And she says, Susan. She goes, I'm so sorry. I go, what? She says, well, I mean, you had such a terrible night. If you had just told someone, we would have given you more pain medication. I said, what are you talking about? It hurts, yeah. But I mean, I said, what are you talking about? My pain, it's tolerable. And she says, but it says here you were up every hour and a half all night long. I said, I was walking. You said I had to walk. She said, I meant you had to go to the bathroom. I said, well, you didn't specify. You said I had to walk. She was like...
See, no, I love this story because you may have been in your life fearful of things, but nobody's ever going to say that you do not have a will of iron. So I said you bullied your doctors. Really, you bullied the cancer. I don't know. It was just that I was amazed by how you handled everything. So were you still afraid at that point, or did it kind of, I had a moment in my life where I like you, my first half of my life, I really lived very safely. And I did everything that I thought was the right thing and the smart thing and the safe thing. And I also wasn't really, focused on writing. I was married and the kids and doing the, just the usual, what we do that we think is safe. And then my husband died suddenly and tragically when I was 39. I remember turning 40 and I was like, I'm alone and I'm 40. This is sucky. But I, at that point, that was when I decided to take my writing seriously and I stopped being scared of stuff. I was like, you can be so careful and so cautious. And then one little thing like that, and your whole life is upside down that you so carefully and cautiously planned. So since then, I've been much less fearful, really, and a lot braver about doing things and taking chances. So did getting the cancer have that kind of an effect for you at all?
I wish I could say that it did.
Okay, I'm just curious.
The reality is that it really didn't. I mean, it did in the sense that I was no longer afraid of cancer. I mean, it was it was interesting. I had been terrified of so many things for so long. That's not something that I could just shut off overnight. I mean, it was something that it was a long process. I can say that I don't live that way anymore. A year in the mountains really did change me. It was transformative. I was not prepared for what a long and intense and, just heartbreakingly honest time it was going to have to be and how many things I was going to have to face. I mean, one of the things that I was really good at my whole life was saying, oh, my life would be great. My life would be perfect. I would be happy if only X, if only Y. And about halfway, maybe a little more than halfway through the 100 Summits, I realized I had this epiphany, and I talk about it in the book, that, nothing's ever going to be without flaw. That's the nature of life. It's the nature of the world. All things are flawed, meaning life is also flawed. And so the reality was, and this was this huge epiphany for me, that if I could say, honestly, if not for one little thing, and I mean, honestly, they're all little things. Okay. I mean, some of them were big, like if not for not having an income, right? I mean, yes, that's a big thing, but in a way, it's also a little thing, because if you're healthy, there are all different kinds of things. If not, but if I said, if not for, and if it wasn't a long list, if it was just one thing or two things, if not for this, I could be happy. Well, guess what? You are happy. Life's perfect now. This is perfect. This is it. And when I had that epiphany and I really changed my worldview, like this is good. and I started looking at what was good instead of focusing on the little thing in the corner that was, focusing on the mouse that looked like an elephant, then all of a sudden things really changed. And yeah, Susan, it does. It really does change your perspective. And I am grateful for every single day. I'm grateful for every day that I have.
Right. And just, I think it's in my friend Maddie Dawson in her book. I think it's in the first one in matchmaking, Beginner's Guide to Matchmaking for Beginners. I always get those titles wrong too. She has this very wise old woman who says something like, instead of trying to find a place to be happy, wherever you are, love that. And I really think that's just one of the wisest things, is because there's so much joy. And if you start looking for the good things where you are and the joy in the moment where you are, then more good things come and you see more good things and you go looking for more good things and it just expands exponentially. So
exactly.
Yeah, and you now, so you moved to Japan. It's no longer a sabbatical.
Yes, I decided about, I think I was, well, I won't give away all the things that happened in the book, but
no, you don't want to give away all the
journey, I decided that, didn't decide. I realized, I accepted in myself the thing that I had feared to admit for all this time, which was that this is where I belong. This is where I'm happy. This is my home. And so I made the decision that I was going to stay. And I just threw that out there into the universe because obviously, I was here on what they call a cultural activities visa. The visa is another long story in itself, and actually one of the funnier ones in the book in some ways.
I got to pause you for a minute. So Holly's saying, "Oh, you're still there." I'm like, yes, my friends. Susan went to Japan to climb the mountains. She moved to Japan. She is now, if you missed the very beginning, she's like a day ahead of us in time. If you're here in the States with me, so
how's
the future, Susan?
The future is awesome. It's a little bit rainy in the future today. We might have a thunderstorm or two. Hopefully we won't have any earthquakes though, because that, that
there was yesterday. Yesterday there was an earthquake.
There was an alert.
Okay.
And it scared me to death. We get on our telephones here, everybody's phone, if we're going to have an earthquake, they have an early warning system that usually gives you about a second and a half of notice if it's going to be a temblor over 6 on the Japanese scale, which is over 7 on the US scale, on the Richter. And yesterday morning, my phone went off and it goes, vert, 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 earthquake. And the shaking usually starts before the alert finishes. And so it started to go off and my cat was sitting in the window. And so I grabbed the cat out of the window and get in the doorway, and the cat's just all kinds of hacked off because, she doesn't understand what's going on. I've just decided to freak out for no reason. And there was no earthquake. There was one, but it was offshore and it was so far away we didn't even feel it. And so, there was this big alert and it got my heart going, and nothing like a little stress test on Thursday morning. And
well, the extra stress test, then she passed the stress test on to me because she messaged me this, "Hey, this is going on right now." And then she's like, "I'm going to put the coffee on and then I'm going to show up and we'll do the thing." And I'm like, "Wait, I know that's tomorrow, I think." So anyway.
Sorry. Yeah, I got a day ahead of myself. I normally don't have a problem with the time difference, but
I do.
I have a little bit of a glitch today.
So back on track. So 100 mountains.
Yes. And by the way, I had climbed exactly 1 mountain in my life before I decided to do this, and it was an absolute disaster. So just so you know, this wasn't a person who was like really in great shape, buff, ready to go, athlete. I was like 180 pounds and had
just had chemo, as I recall.
Well, actually, no. When I finished chemo, I was only about 138 pounds. I had dropped a lot of weight, but so I'm like 138 pounds, skinny as a rail for the first time in my life, which was great. But I have no experience climbing mountains, and I somehow think this is going to be the funny part was I had read Wild by Cheryl Strayed. And I the whole time I was reading that book, I was like, what an idiot. She thought she could walk the trail without ever having any experience. What a dummy. She didn't need dirt. And I'm like, I think I'll go climb 100 mountains. Pot, kettle, anything. It was hilarious. I mean, I thought, no, I trained for it. And I did, in fairness. I was walking 10 kilometers a day. Even when I was in chemo, I actually started the day of my treatments, I gave myself off. The day after my treatments, I made myself walk 2,000 steps. Next day, I made myself walk 4,000 steps. Next day, I had to walk 6,000 steps till I got up to about 12,000 steps. And then I continued to do that until my next chemo treatment. And I had my chemo treatments 2 weeks apart. I was on a dose-dense schedule. And so I had trained in terms of the physical stamina. And I figured, well, all I'm adding in is the elevation. Yeah, well, the elevation is non-negligible. I actually didn't have a problem with stamina on the mountains. I did have some problems with fear.
Yeah.
These were non-technical mountains, by the way, most of them. There were some technical bits that were exciting. Good stories in the book. But yeah.
Right. You don't get all the stories here. You have to read the book to get all the stories. So, Susan, before I forget, you had something you wanted to show us.
Yes. So for the people who read the book, when I went to Hokkaido, which is the northernmost major island of Japan, and I did some climbs up there. And one of the things the Hokkaido was originally populated by people called the Ainu, who are the indigenous people of Japan. It is unknown exactly how far back. I mean, Japanese native people would tell you also that they also are indigenous to Japan, but not to Hokkaido. The Japanese people are mostly native to Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu. The Ainu are a Asiatic people who are native to Hokkaido. And so they are also indigenous native Japanese, but they are different, slightly different from the people that we think of as Japanese. They're more of a tribal people. And the Ainu worshipped owls. They believed that owls were their gods, and they were very, very intensely respectful of the owl. And I happen to love owls. Owl was one of my first words that I ever spoke. And when I was up in Hokkaido, one of the things that I really wanted was to find a owl carved by a native carver that I could bring back as a souvenir of my travels. And there is a story I did. It almost looked like I was not going to, but I did. In fact, it had to be one that spoke to me. I wanted to meet the person who made it, and I wanted it to be an owl that when I looked at it, it spoke to me, and I felt like this is my owl. And so I tell the story of the owl in the book, and
here's the owl.
That's my little owl.
I love that. Very cool.
This is the owl that spoke to me. And you can see that he's hand carved. I met the man who made him. And he told me when I picked him out, he said, "This is a good owl." And he said, when he carves them, he asks the gods to put their spirit into the owl to protect the person that the owl belongs to.
Oh, see, that is just, and he said it was a good owl. So
he said, "This is a very good owl. You've made a very good choice." This one was unusual. This one was much smaller and much more unusual. So was it, Alice? That's awesome. Yeah, it was mine too. So.
Yeah, Alice, for those of you who are just listening, Alice said owls are adorable. And no,
grandson's first word.
Alice said owl was my grandson's first word, and his favorite animal is a toddler. And one of the things I was very disappointed not to see, I was going to visit Susan in Japan this year, actually.
You are going to visit me in Japan,
well,
later.
Not this year. And then COVID happened.
Likely.
And she was going to take me to the Owl Cafe and, all of those. There's an Owl Cafe.
Yes. And you can pet the owls, and the owls are free to roam around now. They used to have them on jesses so that they could still move around, but they couldn't go anywhere they wanted to. And now they've removed all the jesses. They're entirely free ranging. They don't sedate them or anything. And the owls interact with people because they like to. They can get away, but they don't.
That is really cool. Yeah, and we've had some other comments. Holly was saying Japan looks really wonderful and she's never been. And by the way, Holly Ward, you win one of Susan's books. You've been very nicely interactive. I'm going to do that now while I'm talking.
Congratulations.
We'll remember that.
My publisher.
Just message me afterward, Holly, and give me your mailing information, and we will get that off to you. Susan doesn't have a copy of her book in Japan right now. Also, thanks COVID, I believe.
Yeah, they're in customs because I guess things from the United States are suspicious now.
Well, yeah. Oops. So we wanted to show you. So we actually had a funny moment because we were like about 5 minutes before go. And I was like, wait, we can share the screen. We'll figure it out. I'll just show a book cover. And I tried to do that. And I actually bumped myself out of the studio, left Susan in there. And then when I tried to come back, I was a guest and she was still a guest. So then we were both guests and it didn't work out very well. So then we had to leave and come back, but we figured it out. So, Susan, tell a little bit more about the book, especially for people who've just been coming in. So what's the format? What will people get when I believe there's photographs of your mountains and all of that. So talk about the book just a little bit more, and then we'll talk about where they can find you and where they can find the book and all of that stuff.
Absolutely. Well, so Climb is basically the narrative. It's narrative nonfiction. It is actually much faster paced than you might think if in terms of being introspective. I was told by my publisher that there was a hard cap 100,000 word limit, and I had to include every mountain and I had to include all of my cancer story. So not a problem. I got off the mountains. I had 150,000 words in bullet point notes that I had to figure out how to narrow down into a 100,000 word book. If you do the math, 100,000 words divided by 100 mountains is 1,000 words per mountain. And I have to include cancer too. So, it was actually, but curiously, it actually worked out really well to have that kind of a hard cap on the words, because I was able to craft a narrative that really was cohesive, but it reads more like a novel than it does a memoir. It's definitely not slow. And it talks about not just mountains and mountain climbing, but it talks about things that I did and the things that I saw. You saw the owl. It talks about the food. It talks about the culture. It talks about a lot of really crazy experiences that I had, because just to, add one more point, we found out a week before we actually came over here that the initial visa application was denied. So we showed up with no visas. And
you had, by that point, if I remember correctly, you had actually let your practice go and sold your house. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, we had sold our house. We had, I have one small storage unit in the States, and then everything else we owned was down into, I think, 12 suitcases. And we came over here with 12 suitcases and a cat, by the way. We brought our cat, more on that in the book. And we had no place to live. You can't rent an apartment in Japan if you don't have a visa. So it was really an adventure. You want to face fear. Look, guess what? What are people's three biggest fears? Being impoverished, being homeless, and having cancer. And I got to do them all within this space.
And doing it all in a foreign country while you're at it. I mean,
being where you don't speak the language very well. Yeah, by the way, I should mention that I had been to my mysteries are set in Japan, and I had come to Japan once a year for research trips. Some of them fairly extended, for several years before this. So I had been to Japan, I had experienced Japan, I had traveled in Japan, but my Japanese was incredibly basic. I mean, it was basically like, if it wasn't historical words and things that I needed for I could talk to you about the Edo period or the Muromachi Jidai when my novels were set, but I couldn't really order advanced things in a restaurant. I could do travel. I could do basic travel, but when it came to kind of explaining things, but if you want to improve your Japanese, the best thing to do is come to Japan and go to the mountains, because everybody will want to talk to you, especially if you're traveling alone. A woman alone in the mountains, everybody wanted to talk. Everybody wanted to find out what's going on with that.
Right. And I know you have great stories, because I'm going to guess the one about the monks is going to be in there. And
oh yeah, there are stories about monks there. I've spent a lot of time on Koyasan, which is one of the most sacred mountains in Japan. We're going there when you come.
When I come, yeah, someday.
And several of my friends came to actually hike with me. Corinne O'Flynn came and hiked with me, and Anna Maria Alfieri came and hiked with me. Laura Van Arendonk Ba, all of whose books are fabulous, by the way. My friends came and they supported me and they hiked with me, and their stories are in the book too. Laura and I, in fact, finished our climbs with a climb of the smallest mountain in Japan. I climbed the highest one, which was Fuji, and so I decided that it would also be appropriate. It didn't count as one of the 100, because I don't really think that a 3.5 meter mountain qualifies as a real athletic adventure, but we did climb it. We had a long arduous expedition to the top of Mount Tempozan, which is, as I said, 3.5 meters high. It does have a summit marker, by the way. I'll be sharing photos of that. We kept our journals. We had to eat the dog because it was really rough expedition, but we did make the summit.
And Mount Fuji, actually, I don't want to get into that. I know there's just absolutely gorgeous stories connected to Mount Fuji, I know, but we want to save the things for the book. So that's
you can ask about anything. I can tell you side stories because, as I said, 150,000 words of notes. There are lots of things.
What I really want to ask you is, so that readers can find you, and I want to talk about the book again in case anybody came in late. So the book is called Climb, Leaving Safe and
Finding Strength on 100 summits in Japan.
100 summits in Japan. Yeah.
But Climb alone will do. You don't just
Climb alone will do. Susan Spann. And by the way, I do want to point out that this book comes out August 3rd,
Monday.
right? Monday? Not Tuesday? Aren't books always Tuesday?
Well, in my experience, books always are Tuesday, except that this one is Monday. So we'll just go with that because COVID.
Okay. All right. Well, the book is coming out very shortly. And even before it was out last week, when I looked at it, it was like #1 in a whole bunch of categories. So I was really excited about that because I mentioned in this book. This might be the first time ever that I'm actually mentioned in a book. So I'm excited about it. And also I love Susan. So Susan, where can they find you? Not just the book, but you have a website. I know. What's your website?
I do. My website is very easy. It's susanspann.com. And my last name is like a bridge, but with 2 N's. So SPANN.com.
Right. Perfect. And then
I'm also on Instagram, Susan Spann author. And I am on Facebook. Obviously, if you're watching this on Facebook, if you just Google Susan Spann, I'm going to come up. I have a personal page and I also have an author page. And my personal page is always set to public. So everything that I post is visible to everybody.
Yes. And I was going to say something. Oh, I know what it was. I got distracted trying to.
That'll be great, Astrid, by the way.
Well, Astrid also said, by the way, earlier, if it makes you feel better, Susan, she also does not have copies of her book, and Prime readers are going to have them first. So, Astrid, tell us what your book is. We'll mention it here while you're on here because
her book is called Investigation in Nottingham, and it is
Investigation in Nottingham. Okay.
Yes, and it deals with a non-binary person who is having trouble with their identity and receives help from a deceased actor in the astral plane.
Well, that sounds absolutely fascinating. And it's called what again?
It's called Investigation in Nottingham.
Investigation in Nottingham. I'm all about authors trying to get word out about their books right now. Life is crazy. So you can find Susan on Instagram. You can find her on Facebook, Susan Spann, SPANN. If you follow her on Instagram and Facebook, you're going to see all kinds of gorgeous pictures because she posts these lovely photos from the mountain climbs in Japan and all those kinds of places. And you get to see pictures of Ubi, the cat.
Yes, Ubi.
And who did not make a
Who's not there?
Did not make a poopy.
Who usually makes an appearance.
Do you want to tell that story real quick that we were talking about Ubi in the cat box? Because personally, I just think it's hilarious.
She didn't do it today. She's out in the kitchen.
I know.
Since I have been in Japan and since COVID's been happening, we've done a lot of things on Zoom. And
you have a small apartment. I'm going to interrupt and just remind everybody, in Japan, it's not a large space of which we're speaking.
Yes, my apartment is actually my apartment is very large for Tokyo standards. It's a 3-bedroom apartment and it runs about 500 square feet total. 3 bedrooms, kitchen, dining area, bath, 500 square feet. So look at part of your house and figure that out. And so the cat box happens to be in my office, and the times when I've had Zoom meetings have varied, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the evening. As I said, I work as an editor and I actually work in the evenings. So my mornings are free for writing and for practicing traditional calligraphy, which I started doing while I was here. And every single time until today that I've had a Zoom meeting, Ubi has come in and dropped the stankiest bomb you can possibly imagine right behind me in the cat box while I've been on my Zoom meeting. And she waits until it's underway so that there's nothing I can do about it but sit there and just marinate until the meeting is over. And God bless her.
God bless her. And since this is Tell Me Your Secrets, it's okay for us to talk about that. So, Susan Peterson, you are the winner of the second copy of that book. So, Susan, you know where to find me. Just message me and we will get your mailing address. Susan Spann, my darling, it is always awesome to speak with you. And we could go on forever, but we really have used up our allotted time. So, thank you for being here.
You.
Wait, Becky has a comment. Becky Lejeune says, Susan, my tortie does the same thing.
It's fortitude, I'm telling you.
Cats. Yeah. Mine would do that too. I'm pretty sure. But I'm in my office and there are no cats here, so I'm safe at the moment. That's it. Oh, I have one more thing that I also want to say, because I should start talking about this, which I'm not. This is a very cool thing. So Susan Spann, another thing about Susan Spann is she is a former, what we proudly call in the Rocky Mountain fiction writers, she's a WOTY, which means Writer of the Year. Yes. So Susan won that back, how many, 3 years ago? I'm
2015. It's been 5 years. Can you believe it?
Wow, is it 5 years? Anyways, it's my turn. So I want to share the wonderful and exciting news. Thank you. That I actually have won the Writer of the Year for the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers this year. So I am excited, and I'm saying this because I have a Viking who's always, you need to tell people, and I'm like, he's like. Anyway, so I did.
Sisters twice, by the way. Makes us sisters twice. We're sister ladies, and we're sisters of the Debutante Ball blog.
Yes, absolutely. That's right. Susan and I began where we got acquainted was when we had our very first books coming out. We were on a blog called the Debutante Ball, and we liked each other then and became friends. And now, here we are. So
congratulations on the WOTY. That is wonderful. You absolutely deserve to be Writer of the Year.
Thank you, darling. And I am coming back to Japan. We'll get there. So just a reminder to all of you guys. Oh, somebody said, I just saw we gave another cat an idea. So that's awesome. Anyways, we are going to go. Thank you all for joining us. This was just awesome. Make sure you grab a copy of Susan's book. It is. I haven't been able to read it yet because I couldn't get an advanced copy either. Life was weird. So mine is coming, and I will be happy to read it when I get it. But I know it's going to be absolutely brilliant, and you all are going to love it. It will be inspirational and funny because Susan is both of those things. So that said, thank you again for being here on Tell Me Your Secrets. Those of you who are watching and listening, take care, be safe out there, wear the mask, and go read a good book. And I'll be back again next week. Actually, I think I have 2 people next week, so stay tuned. So we'll have fun. All righty, bye for now. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.